Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining SWAN-WSAA Partner Webinar. And we are today focusing on data center growth and water security in Asia Pacific. We are very excited to bring this topic forward and very excited to be partnering to bring it with our partner Water Services Association of Australia, which is a peak body in Australia of water. And today we're going to be I'm going to do a quick update on SWAN, and we will be hearing from 3 different presentations from WSAA, Ecolab, Sydney Water, and we're going to have some time for Q&A and open discussion. So as we will be taking the questions at the end, I invite you to add your questions. When you see it on the Teams on top, there's a Q&A function. Please put your questions there while our presenters are speaking, and we will be sharing all of the slides and recording afterwards to your registered email, so you'll have it afterwards. And my name is Solbo Dashmigmer. I am the Asia Pacific lead at SWAN Forum. And for those who might not be familiar with SWAN, we are a global nonprofit dedicated to advancing digital water transformation in the water sector, and we bring together water utilities, solution providers, and industry experts to share their knowledge, raise awareness, and accelerate the adoption of smart, data-driven solutions to drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater networks worldwide as they move across their different digital maturity journeys. And how we do that is primarily focused on 3 main strategic pillars. So something similar to this one, the engagement with our growing global network of water ecosystem. We do have different networking and meeting opportunities, both regionally and globally, both online and offline. And education is what we do. Similar to this one is knowledge sharing, which are technical and educational contents, both online and offline. And also execution is we do different concrete research and strategic outputs together. Then together with the SWAN Forum, we help to transform water together. And without we move forward, as we are working on the data center, I want to use a quick Mentimeter survey to understand where everyone is in their data center journeys. So I'm going to put in the chat to use this link. So that you can answer the question. Or you can use the QR code to answer the question. I have 2 short questions to answer for you guys. Let's see. Can anyone check if the link is working for you guys? Yep, I think it looks like it's working. I can see the updates from people. So let me share my screen to show you guys how it's looking so far. Yep, thanks, Amir. Okay. So we wanted to ask, where is your organization is at the moment in its data center journey? I can see many folks are engaging with stakeholders and having a strategy and position. That's a very strong sign. And some of you are not started or not sure and learning more, similar to this opportunity. I can see more responses coming in. You can use either the QR or the link on the chat to answer. This is great to see many of you are already engaging with the stakeholders. And second question is on, what do you see as the biggest challenge from data center growth right now? So it looks a little small. I'll read out: forecasting future demand, securing enough water supply on the availability side, planning infrastructure updates, managing energy use, policy and regulation, public engagement and funding. So you can answer your top 3 up to top three, the biggest challenges as of now. Securing enough water supply and forecasting future demand, and I can see it's pretty much all across the sector. Securing enough water supply is one of the large area. Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing. And without a further ado, I would like to bring forward today's session will be moderated by Cyril Murtagh, who is a manager of energy and SCADA at Hunter Water. And as this webinar is organized by SWAN's Energy Efficiency and Decarbonization Community, he leads our APAC side of energy efficiency community. And with over 18 years of experience across energy, automation, and operational technology, Cyril brings deep expertise in helping utilities improve resilience and sustainability. So I will have Cyril take it from here.
Thanks, Volpi. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome everyone. It's funny, I recall discussing with a colleague, I was probably procrastinating instead of finishing business case, how every online search, AI prompt, streaming service, digital transaction ultimately relies on a physical asset. Now, as our uptake of these, amazing digital services expands, it is driving unprecedented investment in data centers across the globe to solve that. But much of that growth is happening right here in the Asia-Pacific region. Us working in utilities, we're accustomed to planning for population growth and economic development. The emerging challenge is the size, concentration, and speed of data center demand. We're seeing development seeking water and power allocations equivalent to entire communities, while being deployed on timeframes that are far faster than traditional utility planning cycles. At the same time, many regions across APAC are already facing increasing pressure for finite water resources. When additional water supplies are needed, the solutions, as you probably well know, are often expensive and energy intensive. For water utilities, this raises important how questions like balancing growth with water security, supporting digitalization while progressing decarbonization objectives, ensure planning can keep pace with the speed of development. And utilities and data center operators, can they work together to create sustainable, resilient outcomes for communities? These are exactly the types of cross-sector challenges that require collaboration and innovation. SWAN forms efficiency and decarbonization community, brings together utility leaders and practitioners from around the world to share experiences, explore emerging technologies, and identify practical pathways to reducing energy use and carbon emissions, while aiming to improve operational resilience. Today's conversation sits perfectly at the intersection of water, energy, digital infrastructure, and sustainability. I'm delighted to be joined by an outstanding panel of speakers who bring perspectives from across the sectors. So first, we're going to hear from Danielle Francis, who's the Manager, Customer and Policy at WSAA, which is Australia's peak urban water body. She's an award-winning water sector leader, recently recognised as Australian Water Professional of the Year for her contributions to water policy and advocacy. Next, we'll hear from Andrew and Melwynn at Ecolab, tackling water, energy and sustainability. Andrew, a corporate account manager, who partners with major industrial and commercial customers across Australia to address practical and innovative operational technology-based solutions. With Andrew, we have Melwynn, Senior Corporate Account Manager, supporting leading hyperscale and co-location data center operators across Southeast Asia, drawing on more than 15 years of industry experience and a master's in chemical and environmental engineering. And finally, we're going to have Paul. Paul's head of business development at Sydney Water, responsible for enabling major development and commercial opportunities across Sydney through water, wastewater, stormwater and recycled water services. He brings more than 30 years of global water industry experience in strategy, asset management and utility operations. So let's get going. Over to you, Danielle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cyril. Okay, now I'm just going to share my screen Now, I'm going to try and keep this nice and tight so that we all have time to present. And also, I will be sharing my slides, so I might skip over a few of the details, but you'll be able to look at them later. So just very quickly, if you haven't heard of WSAA, we're the peak body for Australia. So 100 or 150 utilities around Australia that supply water services to customers are all our members. And we actually released a fairly detailed paper in December last year all about data centres and water in Australia, because we could see that data centres were really looming on the horizon as quite a big and important issue. And so we wanted everyone to get familiar with the policy aspects and get sort of familiar with the way data centres work and the water issues associated with that. We proposed 5 key principles, which in simple terms were really support early engagement between the water sector and data centres. We encourage transparent reporting of the water use. We'd really like to see that come to the fore so that everybody involved can make good policy decisions going forward. We actually recommended that there be minimum water efficiency standards put in place for data centres, recycled water and circular economy so that it's really sustainable, and fair cost recovery frameworks. And you can download our paper at that QR code there if you want to. So in Australia, the policy context is really evolving. We were really pleased to see that both the federal and the New South Wales government put out a set of expectations or principles that fairly well reflected our own. And in Australia, the Prime Minister announced only last week that there's going to be a special Office of AI set up, and some sort of standards are likely to be legislated late this year or early next. And there's lots of things happening. We've got the New South Wales pricing regulator reviewing developer charges, which is the mechanism by which lots of data centres might be covered. We've got NEIGHBOURS, which is a green sustainable building framework, actually working on potentially developing a water efficiency framework for data centres. The Greens Party in both the New South Wales and the federal parliament have brought inquiries where they're undertaking some quite detailed public hearings about all aspects of data centres. Victoria and South Australia have released their own framework or strategy. And we're seeing quite a growing amount of community interest in things like that. And some of it is positive and some of it's not. It's quite, can be quite a sort of a topical issue, really. I've just pasted on the right, a couple of examples of the things that were in the New South Wales principles. One, for example, about efficient use of water, and another one about making sure that prices don't get increased for household, which we think is a good measure. Globally, it's been really interesting, and what we would observe, you can read more detail about this in our paper, but what we would observe is that a lot of places around the world maybe at the start didn't have very structured frameworks for data centres. They tend to be adopting more structured frameworks now. Singapore actually had a moratorium and then came out with the Green Data Centre Roadmap after that. America is quite an interesting mix of different approaches, probably because it's quite different by states, but there's some interesting examples. Some places are focusing on legislating standards like Texas. Then you've got other places that are looking at very specific things like Las Vegas saying we're just going to ban evaporative cooling. There's some different sort of approaches that are out there. If you look at Spain and the EU, there's some interesting things there about requiring publishing of PUE and WUE. I'm going to assume that you know what those mean about efficiency metrics. And in Spain, they're asking that anyone over 100 megawatts has to be in the top 15% of energy. But today we're going to talk a bit more about Malaysia. Just a few myths too, because there's some interesting things that I see often at conferences or in the public domain and so on. One of them is people say, oh, if there's high water use, that might just be for a few days a year, the few peak days a year. Look, generally the reports, the water usage figures that we're reporting and that we're seeing reported are for water usage every day. So that's average. And the peak actually can be higher. So that's neither good nor bad. Data centres are simply our customers, but it is important to understand with accuracy what's being talked about. Another one I hear is people say, well, data centres use less water than other industries, but that's often a national comparison. And I think that's important to understand that data centres tend not to be in Australia spread very, very geographically evenly. They're really concentrated in a few locations. So that might be the national split, but what we're finding is it's much more concentrated in certain areas. Also, phantom and speculative demand is a really tricky issue everywhere. There were some interesting claims here where for energy, where it was claimed that some studies basically came out and said we think that actually 85% of the claimed energy connection demand won't eventuate. And so some people have said, well, is it going to be the same for water? We think that there will be some phantom or speculative demand in water, but we think that it certainly won't be that much just because water applications usually come and they're at a more mature stage. So quick deep dive on Malaysia, and I'm really grateful to the people at SPAN. They weren't able to present today, but they shared some resources with me and have met with me to be able to check, because I wanted obviously to make sure that what I'd looked at was accurate. So that was very kind of them. The national regulator is SPAN, which is the National Water Services Commission, and it's been developed under the sort of guiding legislation. And right now they have released some guidelines that are non-binding at the moment for water supply guidelines for data centre development, but they are currently developing some legislation around those guidelines. This was just a really nice way of summarising the situation at a presentation in Singapore Water Week from someone of SPAN from Malaysia, where he talked about some of the demands in 2 different states or parts of Malaysia, 900 or 800 megalitres a day. So it's quite a lot, and talked about that being about 10% of Malaysia's national water reserve margin. And the water reserve refers to kind of what's spare capacity right now. And you can see a few great words that I've highlighted there about the approach and all the different things that they're looking at. And on the right-hand side, you can see that they're approaching it really proactively and constructively, looking at lots of different ways to supply that water, but to integrate those data centres sustainably. Also, they shared with me another conference presentation that was really useful, because it basically shows where the demand is concentrated, and you can see some of the figures in those hotspots. So they like to have a water reserve margin of about, say, 15 to 20, but as you can see in Selangor and Johor, it's a bit lower than that. But the demands there for data centres, you can see, are really quite big. Now, just to note, that's not the water demand of data centres right now. That's the demand through applications that data centres would like for the future, different timeframes, but some of them are as early as 2 or 3 years away. So you can see that that's quite big demands of water. And then you see this quite small figure for reclaimed water. So that's basically how much reclaimed water is available for connection now. And just an important note, it's not how much wastewater is available now, and I'll get to that. It's about how much is available to connect to right now, because the focus in Malaysia is that we have lots of the wastewater, but we need to be able to build the treatment and the transport assets to connect it to customers. So this is a map that just shows some of the distribution of the individual data centres, and this really surprised me, because there are some, at the bigger end of the scale, some really big ones. I'm aware of one, that has been reported in Australia that was 40 million litres a day. You can see there's a category here for some that are sort of 3 or 4 times that. So you can see there must be some really big ones on the horizon. But this is the one I was talking about. So what they are looking at is their wastewater capacity, and what they have worked out is that they have basically enough wastewater, or almost enough wastewater, to meet the demand from data centres, but what they don't have yet is the infrastructure to connect it, to treat it and connect it to them. So there's a big program of infrastructure works to do that. And that's where the SPAN guidelines come in. They were released last year, and there's a few key components. It has metrics for PUE, WUE, and carbon usage effectiveness, interestingly. One of the key things that gets reported a lot, for WUE, they have to consider the location and not aim for places with high water stress. But the other one, it has a recommended design WUE of 2.2, and there's a requirement that you would report that every year, and then that you have to improve that to about 2% or lower over 10 years. And there was a point where that was proposed to be about 1.8, but then there was some liaison with the data centre market, and the one that's currently in the guideline is 2.2. And as I said, at guideline stage, it's not binding, but I understand that they're looking at developing legislation to move towards an enforceable type approach to this. And just to note about that, that WE is for all water sources. So it's not a separate one for different water sources. That's for all water sources. They want it to be a WE. Now, I'm going to be super quick because I'm running out of time. Just a few details about the process to apply for connection. They ask for lots of different demand, timing, and things like that. And then the water utility advises how much water can be found in each place. And there's actually there's no prohibition on potable water, even though there's a really strong encouragement of the reuse water. And then lastly, there's a couple of interesting things. They ask them to have at least 2 days of storage on site, and they're taking a beneficiary pays approach. And they have got something like a kind of take or pay approach, which is to say, if you're going to ask for a certain amount of water, you're probably going to have to pay basically for that amount of water, just to discourage people from kind of putting in inflated demands. So I'm on time now, so I will end there. Thank you very much. But, and yes, and I'll provide the more detailed slides. Thanks, Cyril.
Oh, super job. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. All right, let's kick across to Ecolab, please. If you have questions, please just type them in the Q&A as we go along. We're hoping to get to them all at the end of the session, folks.
Thanks, Cyril. Yeah, so I thought maybe, thanks, Tim. We can move to the next slide. Before we get onto the water side of things, I thought we could take a quick step back and look at what's happening across the industry. We know AI is driving huge demand for data centers, but the power and water infrastructure aren't necessarily growing at the same pace. That's why sustainability is moving from being a nice to have to a genuine growth constraint. The main point here is that data centers aren't just digital infrastructure anymore. They're also major consumers of power and water. So the question's really changing from how much capacity can we build to how do we keep growing in a sustainable way. And that's where the connection between energy, cooling and water becomes really important. Thanks, Tim. So one thing I find interesting is that water and energy are often discussed as separate topics. In reality, they're tightly connected, where water-based cooling can reduce energy consumption, but if we move away from water altogether, we often need more electricity. So it's usually not as simple as saying less water equals a better outcome. The real question here is, what's the best solution for that site in that climate with that power source? That's why I like this quote from Ben Townsend's perspective. We shouldn't be asking whether water should be used or not used. We should be asking where it makes sense and where it doesn't. In the end, we're trying to optimize the whole system, not just one sustainability metric. Okay, so cooling methods by climate. So this is where local conditions really matter. There's not one cooling strategy that's right for every location. Climate, water availability, water quality, and energy sources all influence what the best solution looks like. The biggest opportunity is getting these decisions right early. If we do that, we can often improve both energy efficiency and water efficiency at the same time, rather than trading one off against the other. With that in mind, I'll hand over to Melwynn. He's going to talk a little bit about what's happening in Malaysia, where we're seeing this challenge play out in real time. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, Andrew. So before focusing on Malaysia, I'd like to start with a broader ASEAN perspective. So across Southeast Asia, we are now witnessing this rapid growth in digital infrastructure. And all of this is really driven by cloud computing, AI adoption, and also digital transformation. Data center investments are growing faster than the global average in this region, and it's fast becoming an important pillar of regional economic growth for Malaysia and the region. At the same time, many of these ASEAN countries, as you can see from the data points here that we have collected, are facing increasing water stress. And what is really interesting here is that we see some of the fastest growing data center markets are also located in these regions where water resources are becoming very, very much constrained. This creates an important challenge. As data centers grow, so does the demand for water and power. The question is, how do we continue supporting digital growth while preserving critical natural resources, especially for the communities and the people that are around these data centers, while they enjoy the uses of AI in progress of their life, quality of life? How are we going to do that in a more sustainable way? So from Ecolab's perspective, the answer lies in water circularity. How do we maximize the value of every drop of water while maintaining operational reliability and efficiency? Malaysia has quickly emerged as one of the most attractive data center markets in Asia Pacific. A recent article has now pivoted to talking about AI being not so much as water constraint, but really the ability to provide stable power. However, as Andrew shared earlier, energy and water always work together. There will be heat that's required to be rejected, and it is the technology that we choose that will impact on how water is going to be used and how much water will be used. Malaysia as a country has attracted billions of dollars in terms of investment from hyperscalers, technology companies driven by AI growth, cloud demand, and also available land as compared to our neighbors in Singapore. And so this has provided a real supportive investment environment and definitely has caught on to a lot of companies who are wanting to invest in Malaysia, not only from global in Americas, but also from Australia. So Johor has become the center of this expansion, benefiting from its proximity, as I mentioned earlier, and its strategic role within the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone. The opportunity for Malaysia now is significant. As Danielle shared earlier, really as capacity continues to expand, both of the water and energy will also rise. And how are we going to deal with it? The challenge for Malaysia is no longer attracting investment, for obviously it is an economic magnet for people to do investing. The government is also trying to ensure they manage the challenges in making sure that this growth remains sustainable and resilient over the long term. Water circularity is moving from concept to reality. So in late 2025, the Malaysian government rolled out an updated sustainable data center framework and tools. This is effective from October 2025, and February 2026 is when it will start to enforce this framework. This was shared by Danielle earlier through SPAN, right, in her presentation earlier. So rather than discussing the regulations, I'd like to focus more on what we're already seeing on the ground. The encouraging news about Malaysia and its water circularity is no longer a concept, and a lot of the data center players, especially those bigger ones in the industry, are leading and beginning to incorporate water reuse and alternative water sourcing in their long-term strategies. So one of the key examples that we see recently published is Bridge Data Center, which also is a customer of Ecolab, where they have publicly demonstrated water circularity initiatives in Johor. We are also seeing growing interest across the industry in reclaimed water, water reuse, and also more efficient water management practices. At the same time, operators are placing great emphasis on water performance metrics. So reporting of WE, PUE has been made mandatory or basically a requirement as they operate. This results in the requirement of having digital monitoring and also thinking about how we can do cooling in a more innovative way. The industry is beginning to recognize that water should be managed as strategically as energy. So the question is no longer whether water circularity will happen in Malaysia. It's really about how quickly Malaysia can able to scale it and support the next wave of growth. It is really critical for the industry players to believe in it and then ensuring that they put the right amount of investment as they are putting with power into water and making sure that we make the growth of the next wave in Malaysia a reality. So to bring this to life, I would like to hand over to Andrew, who will share how data center operators can actually scale alternative water resources, which we are talking about quite a lot in the past few discussions, while ensuring the reliability and resilience required for mission critical operations. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Melwynn. So yeah, it's good we're seeing the really rapid acceleration of data center growth in the region. At the same time, we're seeing developers and operators looking to leverage alternative water sources, as Melwynn mentioned. So things like recycled water, rainwater harvesting, and other alternative sources to improve resilience. It's a great opportunity, but the challenge is that these sources tend to be more variable. And if that variability isn't managed properly, it can lead to things like scale, corrosion, biofouling, and overall reduced cooling performance. So when cooling performance is affected, it becomes much more than a water issue. It becomes an efficiency, reliability, and an uptime issue. So for me, that's the key takeaway. Water security isn't just an environmental discussion anymore. It's also becoming a business continuity discussion as well. The good news is these risks are really manageable with the right design, treatment, and monitoring strategy. And that's why I keep coming back to that water energy connection. If we want the best sustainability outcomes, we need to look at the whole system rather than any single KPI. So hopefully that gives some context around why water is becoming such an important topic for the industry. I'll just hand back to Melwynn and to wrap up with some key takeaways. Thanks, Melwynn.
All right. So as we close, we'd like to leave you with one key thought, right? So sustainability is now no longer about just reporting on ESGs. While those are requirements, sustainability now to every data center industry players operating is really the ability to continuously operate profitably while having minimal impact on the environment. What we are wanting to do in terms of scaling alternative sources and also looking at water energy nexus is really about ensuring a data center performs efficiently, reliably, and competitively every single day throughout its life cycle. For every business, we don't want to have to make a decision on whether data centers should be sustainable or profitable. It should not be a compromise. For every business, I think this can both go hand in hand. And ultimately, the decisions we make today will define the performance we live with in the data center tomorrow. To support sustainability growth, there are three priorities that we need to have, right? So first, to think circular. Water circularity requires more than just finding new water sources. We need to manage the water across the entire life cycle, from intake to discharge, and then also maximizing the reuse and efficiency of it. Second, out of sight, out of mind. We need to make sure we measure continuously. Sustainable outcomes do not happen by accident. We need to make sure that we have continuous monitoring and data-driven insights that are essential to verify performances and identify opportunities for improvement. Last but not least, innovative cooling. As AI drives higher compute density now, technologies such as direct-to-chip liquid cooling can enable greater thermal efficiency and help support future digital infrastructure demands. Malaysia has a tremendous opportunity not only to become a regional data center leader, but also a leader in sustainable water management. And that future will be built through water circularity, digital intelligence, and innovation. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you. It's already quite a number of questions coming in relation to your presentation. I'm going to try and move as quick as I can. So I'm going to go over to yourself, Paul, and let you get into your presentation, please.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Just give me a moment while it uploads. Confirm, can somebody tell me when you can see it?
Not yet. Still, I think it's starting to appear. It's black right now.
Yep.
I'll let you know.
Fingers crossed. So I'll start before the slides come up. So the context for Sydney, bit of a boom town for data centers in Australia. Most of the undersea cables come into Sydney Harbour that actually enters Australia. And Sydney, in and of itself, experiences a drought at least once every 10 years. So very interesting environment in which to operate data centers. And I am just wondering what's going on with my sharing.
I was going to ask you, Paul, can you give it a fresh?
I'm going to try again. And
your camera's coming through, no problem. Yes, your screen sharing.
Okay, here we go. Does that work this time? Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Awesome.
So some of this has already been mentioned, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But demand in Sydney is rapidly growing against the backdrop of a water-stressed city already. There's government reports that indicate that we are already beyond the tipping point of our rainfall-dependent sources and city demand for growth. Despite that, data centers are becoming our largest demand, and it's a narrative one. Cloud adoption, AI, big data. We're getting proposals now that are for 1 gigawatt to 1.2 gigawatt campuses, so pretty large campuses. And they're wanting to locate close to the city because of latency issues. So that brings into the conversation, land, customer proximity, power, fiber, and then ultimately water infrastructure off the back of that. Okay, why is that not going down? Just to kind of give everybody a feel of what this looks like. This is our top 20 water users for 2025. Our largest drinking water user is 2 megalitres a day, and that is a brewery. We had our first data center appear on our list last year, but that is a first early stage of a data center. It's not a fully scaled, fully blown operating facility. We are getting routine requests for 5 to 10 megalitres a day, and Danielle referred to it earlier. We're getting some requests for 30 to 40 megalitres a day. So at least double the highest water user, highest drinking water user, and potentially much, much higher than that. 5 megalitres a day is about 9,000 homes equivalent. And for those of you that are experiencing this, which I'm sure you are, a data center never comes on its own. Our experience is that there's 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 wanting to locate in close proximity to each other. So again, trade-off, what's driving it? Well, rate of growth, the technology, the reliability requirements. Certainly some of our data centers are telling us they need 99.99% uptime. I don't know a water system anywhere in the world will get anywhere near that. So lots of conversations about dual supplies, dual sources. And then there's a trade-off between energy and water that Ecolab talked about earlier. Some of the information coming out of the most recent data centers are saying 15 to 20% more efficient with water-based cooling compared to power-based cooling. So it is a genuine trade-off. Just to put that into context, if they're using 15% more power for cooling, that isn't 15% more power they're trying to get from the grid. It's 15% less revenue they're generating from selling computing power. So it's actually a revenue issue for data centers rather than the availability of power. We're trying to get them in the door early. We are finding that we have been approached when people are getting planning approvals. It's way too late to do water planning at that stage. So when we're encouraging the industry to come and talk to us when they're even thinking about a site, and therefore we can give them the feasibility, but plenty of confidentiality agreements floating around because it's a very competitive industry. Government have just run an expression of interest process and 15 data centers have been supported, and a series of other things that were going on. But we're trying to change the planning pathways such that we can get in the process earlier and give earlier intelligence as we go. Now, this is the one that everybody kind of gets really interested on about how are we classifying what demand looks like. So we take all our requests from the data centers themselves. On the face of it, they are asking for in the order of 250 megalitres a day, which is roughly 18 to 20% of the additional water demand on the city. But you can see there's a lot of low confidence, low range, the ones in the green, where we're only seeking feasibility advice. And you're seeing more confidence at the 4s and 5s where they're getting planning approval or they're in construction. Realistically, we know both extremes are not real, and the line probably runs somewhere down the middle of this curve. But whichever way you look at it, it's a large volume of water that we're going to have to find against that backdrop of a drought-constrained city. And social license is a material issue in Sydney, where people really do not want drinking water used for cooling and evaporating to the environment. So we're trying to find new sources of water. What does that look like? A little bit like what was presented by Danielle on Malaysia. We have plenty of wastewater, and therefore tapping those resources and having the infrastructure in place is going to become the really critical issue. But in order to do that, water is heavy. So we've got to think about proximity to source. If you build desalination plant, where these data centers are going and where the grid infrastructure is, the new energy grid infrastructure, it's 40 kilometers from the coast. So desal is really not going to work. So we really have to rethink some of that strategy as well and how that all works together. Fundamentally, if you're building a recycled water system, It's an integrated supply chain. You need the source, you need the transmission pipelines, you need the storage, you need the local distribution, and then you get the data center. And then you do it all in reverse with wastewater. And I'll talk a little bit about wastewater in a minute. But needing all of that infrastructure is very costly, and moving water long distances is incredibly costly. So getting close to source is going to be really important. This is the bit that we kind of have started to think about, because everybody talks about energy, but they all talk about it as a disaggregated grid. You get generation from one customer or one company. You then get transmission from Transgrid. You then get storage on site. Then you get an energy distributor moving the energy at a local source. Water is doing that completely, not once, but twice. You're having to supply the water to the data centers, and you're having to take the wastewater away from the data centers and manage it. Wastewater is the forgotten cousin, and it does need to be thought about very significantly, because all the data centers do is they're a glorified kettle, and they concentrate up what you give them. So this is our strategy. This is what we're looking at. Is the blobs on the page that you can see are where we can seriously unlock recycled water from our existing facilities. You can see the facilities on the page there. And the numbers are where we're seeing significant demand from data centers. So Western Sydney, close to transmission grids, is becoming very popular. The number 3 that you can see in the middle of the screen there is driven by the need to have data centers in close proximity to customers. So the financial institutions and the banking arrangements. So the actual location of the data center and the latency becomes really, really important. So with a number of opportunities that we're trying to unlock. But as you can say, we've got 87 data center requests, 290 megalitres a day being requested. In terms of what we've chose to do, we've communicated these principles to government, and government are aligned to them. We're seeking full cost recovery from large water users. We're seeking mutually beneficial outcomes. And what that means is recycled water use actually could have material benefit to how we manage our wastewater system in future. And we're requiring all entities to be water efficient. We may have different water efficiency targets where they're using recycled water instead of potable water. So they might allow them to be less water efficient where they're using an alternative source of water. And that drives the economics of a data center. Couple of challenges that we have and exploring is we cannot and will never be able to build infrastructure as quick as a data center can be built. So they can go from planning to built in about 2 years. Building a data center takes about 9 months. Building large recycled water infrastructure is anything between 4 to 6 years. So we're looking at pathways of providing interim drinking water supplies with any latent capacity we may have, although there's not a lot of that, and then replacing it with recycled water once the infrastructure is delivered. And equally, if they are using potable water, and particularly against the backdrop of a drought-constrained city, how do we then get them to fund leakage reduction or water conservation activities to offset the demand that they're actually taking from our system, and therefore making the resilience of the system worse for all of the customers in the city? So I'm going to stop there, and hopefully I did that within about 10 minutes. So thank you very much, and back to you.
Thanks, Paul. And thanks to all the presenters. Really, 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 really informative. And that's evidenced by the number of questions that are coming in. I've got a few questions. I was going to ask if the presenters wouldn't mind just throwing the cameras back up. That would be great. I'll try and bounce between myself and Zolbo asking the questions that have been raised in the chat. I'm going to throw the first one over to Melwynn and Andrew, if that's all right. Guys, we're seeing Southeast Asia is kind of leading this in the number of data centers ahead of Australia, particularly. where do you see Australia can learn from what your experience is in places like Johor?
Yeah, maybe I can take that question. So with Johor and Australia in comparison, I think in Australia you can enjoy a temperate climate. There are possibilities to utilize free cooling in the seasons that you enjoy compared to Johor, where a lot of cooling towers need to be run on a 24/7 basis. What we see in Johor that I feel could be replicated is really the ability to focus on three areas, right? So one is to look at industries in around the area, thereby diversing the water sources. We are looking at 2.2 in terms of the WUE, but on average, with the customers that we're dealing with having a robust treatment system, we are looking at 1.8. And with that, you thereby reduce water usage by at least 20-30%. So looking at all of these where we put in a water circularity lens, look at reducing policies or encouraging water reclamation and water reuse. This all goes into what the local authorities can invest in and also have more communications and dialogue with the operators so that they are able to make into considerations all of these when they build up the data centers in Australia.
Thank you. Thank you. Danielle, Melwynn, you mentioned policies. Danielle, that's very much kind of a WSAA space. We've got elements like what you're talking about there, Melwynn, with on-site water reuse and reducing on-site use. Is there any data center operators or reporting frameworks kind of addressing that here in Australia?
The on-site water use?
Yeah.
Yes. So some of them are starting to report their water use, but they typically will report it in WUE terms. A lot of them won't report it in actual terms, and they often claim that they don't want to do that because it can allow their competitors to kind of back calculate and work out details of their operation. So you are seeing more of them start to calculate their on-site water use. But it's not sort of to a standardized format, and it's not always in a centralized place. For example, some of them report because they're caught by New York Stock Exchange requirements and things like that. And there's a lot of push in Australia to say, well, what everyone in the community would probably like to see is standardized reporting in a standardized way, all in one consistent place, because essentially people do want to be able to kind of compare in some ways how different ones are operating. So I think there's still some way to go, and it will be interesting to see if the government's standards actually require that transparent reporting.
Thank you. Paul, you've touched on this, and so did Melwynn there a little bit. The water energy nexus. Can you dive a little bit more into what you're seeing in the market, both from perhaps here and what you're seeing from engagement with others?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's different players have different strategies. So we have players in the market at the moment that have made the decision to go completely power cooled, driven by their own technical requirements. They use 15 to 20% more power. They're prepared to take that premium and pass it on to their customers. Some of that has spawned from when those companies were formed. So they were formed in a drought, in a highly constrained water system. So they've just adopted that from day one, and good luck to them. They've done it very well, and they're a very successful organization. Got other organizations coming to us and say, if water is available, we want it. We can be way more efficient. It's the easiest cooling mechanism. Its thermal characteristics are 4,000 times better, or whatever it is. And what it actually means is a 500 megawatt or a gigawatt data center can sell 20% more computing to the industry, to the customers, than rather than gobbling it up in power to cool the system. So it really is. It's not an ecological play. It's not a sustainability play. It's a totally an economic play from their perspective, that they can sell that floor space now and that computing power. And ultimately, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to maximize their investments. So if water's available, we are seeing some trends. And this is a really interesting one with WE. Adiabatic systems seem to have really low WUE because it's an annual calculation. What actually happens is they don't use water for 9 months of the year, and then they use massive amounts of water for 3 months of the year. And actually, from a water management perspective, that is an absolute nightmare. You can't have water sat in pipes doing nothing for 9 months and then all of a sudden expect it to turn on and be the quality that you need it to be. So we're starting to learn some of that now. It's starting to emerge in the market. And it's a nuance of a way the calculation is done. So a data center can look really efficient and less than 1 WUE and be highly problematic to manage. So that's something that we're all starting to get to grips with now.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to throw one question anyway to all the presenters at once. Like, are we seeing any relationship with other utilities or bodies beyond water? So what I mean is it's tied to a question that's been asked here. Is there anyone looking, or are we pushing to co-locate data centers so that it's more of a circular use or a loop management of, let's say, the heating, the cooling, the liquid use? Are we pairing with universities or large buildings that may require heating systems or similar opportunities?
It's a great opportunity. I think you've got to remember that when you've got 87 data centers knocking on your door and they're all saying that urgency is paramount and that speed to market is absolute, it is a little harder to try and think really, really creatively than you might think if you had just a couple who were knocking on your door, for example. So for me, I mean, Paul would have a better view on that in Australia, but for me, I like to think that maybe in some of the markets that haven't been hit with just quite as much speed and urgency, they might have a little bit of time to explore that, but it also depends on the appetite of the data centre to think a little bit creatively like that and work with the water utility.
There's some fantastic examples internationally. I know of a couple in UK where they're doing swimming pools, saving councils money. A couple in Scandinavia where they're providing hot water to households. We haven't found anybody with any appetite in Sydney to do anything other than build a data center and get it operating. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have those aspirations in the long run, but really is not driving the speed, as Danielle said, speed to market. It is a competitive arms race at the moment. You will have read in the media, maybe, I'm not sure what it's like in Asia, but Anthropic basically said less than a month ago, we'll buy every bit of AI capability and capacity that's in the market. And the reaction to that was everybody wanted to build their data center yesterday, not tomorrow. So it's a bit of a gold rush at the moment, guys, and it's an economic play. I think with better planning and congratulations to New South Wales government, they are trying to think about what co-location means, and that means co-location of water, industry, energy. We've had a good example come through today where there's a Transgrid substation, Sydney Water recycled water facility, and a gem and a gas main all going through a proposed site, which actually is probably the mecca for any data center in terms of the ability to do something.
Cyril, we're seeing, I suppose, in some ways, Ecolab are in a little bit of a unique position because we have divisions looking after a whole range of different industries, and within a particular industrial ecosystem, if you like, we've got visibility on water discharge from, say, a food and beverage manufacturing site and those types of things. And so we're seeing our global partners at least starting a lot of those conversations about, hey, what can we do locally within our industrial ecosystem here with the partners that are around us, and how can we leverage those partnerships and those insights through our position to look at the opportunities there at least. So it's definitely something that's in discussion and on the agenda with them.
Yeah, so to share a little bit on the perspective and flavor of outside of Australia, I think the intent is really critical. In Singapore, we are working with industry players, right, with the government support on non-profitable organizations. We are looking at alternative cooling, right, like seawater, pulling industries together, working together across the industries. Yes, they are competitors, but in terms of building the entire country's economics, where we are now fighting against each other in competing for investments on AI developments, I think it's invested interest in countries to really look at the vast resources. In Singapore, we are very limited in terms of what resources we have, and thereby we have put in place with the government and the universities to come together as a whole industry to then look at how we can do it. One of the other proposition that we can have is also whether we can look at data centers differently. Nowadays, people are looking at more denser compute capacity. We are looking at, current grid availabilities on power. And so the part on edge is also a good proposition, or instead of having a huge data center with lots of megawatts capacity, we are looking at distributing that capacity throughout the region, throughout the country as well, and thereby reducing the latency as well. So it's really something that is being discussed now. I think the AI development and how the whole infrastructure is going to change, and everyone is competing in terms of the technology. I shared earlier, where NVIDIA is now talking about 45 degrees Celsius as the cooling water temperature. So think about that, right? If you need heating, I think that will make a good proposition compared to the 20s and 30s where water is still relatively cold when it comes to being able to be thermally or energily used in the substream or the downstream of the environment of the
Thank you, Melwynn.
ecosystem.
Thank you very much. I've just realized the time, we're coming close to the hour. I'm gonna thank all of our presenters again. I'm gonna cut over to Zolbo to wrap it up. I'm also gonna use this opportunity to ask anyone who's interested in energy, decarbonisation, the challenges we face, contact Zolbo. Please get involved in this wonderful group. And also, Zolbo, I was hoping you put up that slide for me on the Carbon Horizon Assessment Tool chart. Can you do that for me? And maybe we can have 30 seconds to spruik it. Thanks, Zolbo. So this is something that right across SWAN, so a global initiative to try and set up some sort of benchmarking and make it easier for utilities to benchmark where they are in terms of their energy maturity. I'll post a link to it from LinkedIn. I'll put it in the chat later on. Thank you all. Zolbo.
Thank you. And thank you everyone who have joined today's call. I think it was very powerful to hear from utility perspective and also like policy perspective across different countries. And also I think it was very powerful to see everyone's poll, like really to see like the key priority for us being the securing enough water and also planning for the future demand being top of our priority. And it was powerful to hear from different perspectives and also going through some of the different questions here. And as we've mentioned, we'll be sharing all of these resources. And just a couple of things. One is, as Cyril mentioned, we would love to see if you'd like to take part in assessment for the readiness tool for SWAN Carbon Horizon Assessment. And other area is with our energy efficiency and decarbonization group. We are looking for SWAN members to take the lead on the volunteer leadership to co-lead the group on energy efficiency group. So we'd love to see if anyone is interested in the opportunity to shape these discussions moving forward. I'll put that in the chat as well. So if there's anyone have any questions about any of these areas, feel free to reach out to me. And overall, thanks everyone who have come here to share your experience. And we were saying that, okay, we're just coming here to share all the journey that we went through. So thanks everyone. Cyril, thank you for putting this event with me together. Danielle, WSAA team, thanks so much for coming to partner and support us, and also SPAN for sharing their information with WSAA, and also, yeah, Paul, Andrew, Melwynn, team, thanks so much for coming to share all of the journey across ASEAN, Malaysia, and Australia, and Sydney. Thanks, everyone, and we'll follow up moving forward.
Thank
Bye,
you all.
everyone.
I
Have a
really
great
hope
day.
you got something from today. Bye.
Thank you.